I've been a real estate lawyer for 31 years. I've been in the trenches working with you guys in regard to closings for 31 years. And unlike other matters that come before us in the General Assembly, it's something that I come to the table knowing something about. And I have long thought that there are two particular classes of people that are severely underappreciated in real estate industry. And one would be paralegals. As you all know, most of your communications are with an attorney's paralegal, and a good paralegal is worth his or her weight in gold. I mean, in fact, I think the reason that my law firm, Harvey & Batty, does so well in real estate is not so much me or my associate, Kevin Dukes, but the fact that my senior paralegal, Cindy Graves, has been with me for 29 years. And she's somebody who knows more about the practice of law, I'll freely admit, than I'm ever going to know. The second individual or second class of people would be realtors. I mean, you guys are the ones, when the contract is signed, and you do a lot of work, obviously, to get that contract signed, and that's what most people think that you do. They know that you advertise property for sale, and they know about the multiple listing service, they know about commissions, they know about, selling agents and listing agents. But I think a lot of people don't realize that you're the ones that hold the hand of the buyer or the seller for when that contract is signed until there's an actual disbursement. And the only time attorneys ever get involved is if there is an irreconcilable problem that ends up going into court somewhere, which is less than 1% of the time. So you guys are the ones that take a buyer through the mortgage lending process, you take them to a home inspector, a termite inspector, you talk to them about various qualifications, various things they ought to do. And I really appreciate that. And I've always said that if I'm working on a closing with a realtor that has great experience and somebody with a good reputation, I can relax and kind of let it go. Is with those that don't have the experience that I get nervous. And so that's, one of the underlying principles behind this bill we just passed in the Senate, and it passed unanimously, by the way, S 1013, was to recognize some of the changes that have occurred in your industry over the past several decades. I mean, markets are always going to dictate what the public expects from you. I mean, buyers and sellers are going to inform you as to what their expectations are, and over time, what you do for buyers and sellers have changed. I mean, it just has. When I first, started practicing law 30 years ago, I don't think that buyers and sellers of real estate relied as much on realtors as they do today. But they demand that now. And so you have to have a working knowledge of 1031s. You have to have a working knowledge of what disclosure requirements. If there's a problem with the house, is this something that the seller needs to disclose? A buyer, when they're trying to qualify for a loan. I mean, you guys are acting in a quasi-legal capacity in many instances. And it was important to make sure that our laws reflect what's happening out there in the private sector in terms of what you're doing. Because what you've seen happen over years is your role has changed, the services that your clients demand of you has changed, but the law has not. And so there's a bit of a disconnect now between what you are required to do because of the expectations and the laws that are on the books. And so one of the primary objectives of 1013, Senate Bill 1013, when I worked on it with Tom Alexander and the Real Estate Commission, is to make sure that the applicable law that applies to the way you conduct your business conforms with industry practices and also allows you to do those things that buyers and sellers are wanting you to do. And chief among them, I would think, would be this new particular, and I'm going to mess up the name of it, but it's you play a transactional role. Instead of being a fiduciary for one of the two parties, you have the opportunity to go ahead and, with the buyer and seller's consent, serve in a more transactional capacity, representing both sides. And this particular bill would allow that relationship. I mean, as it exists now, as you know, you've got a fiduciary duty to either one of the two parties. And that's not really in practice what happens these days. I mean, I think buyers and sellers a lot of times are looking for somebody to work with them, to help facilitate things. And it's very cumbersome to do that if you owe a fiduciary duty to one of the parties. And so what you've seen, and you guys already know this, but in other states, laws have been changed to allow realtors to assume that transactional function. And I think that's going to be extremely valuable, not only to you and the services you provide, but to the public at large, because that's ultimately who's going to drive things here. And I'm going to make this observation to you all as well. In South Carolina, the real estate closing process is governed and has been since the mid-'80s by a state Supreme Court case called the Buyer Services case. You probably are all familiar with that. And the state Supreme Court said in that decision that the closing of a real estate transaction is inherently the practice of law, and therefore an attorney needs to be involved. And that has caused a lot of complications for you guys, because you never know how far along that continuum you can go before you start to be practicing law. And we've gone ahead and we've had you can fill in the blanks, and that's an okay thing. Well, what happens at the very end in the other terms when you go ahead and you start listing things out? Is that something you can do without a lawyer, or is it something you have to have a lawyer? But I think the way the market's moving, I think in 10 or 15 years, and thank God I'll be out of the practice of real estate law by that time, so it won't cut my throat. But in 10, 15 years, you're going to see the stranglehold and the monopoly that attorneys have on the closing process and on title insurance relaxed. You got market forces at work. Banks want to be involved in issuing title insurance. You've got realtors that are becoming more and more sophisticated and able to handle the transaction, and people are going to start to demand it. And again, you can have laws, but laws only hold back what the market wants for so long. And what the market wants is a more efficient, less expensive, more responsive way to have their real estate needs taken care of. And so ultimately, I think over time, again, I think it will take a little bit of time, but I think that 10, 15 years from now, I predict, if you can look into a crystal ball, that realtors will be doing even more things in the closing process than they're doing today. I also think 10, 15 years from now, and this should be, I think, a long-term goal on your part, is to have yourself be policed in the same way that attorneys police themselves to the South Carolina Bar. Instead of having it Labor Licensing and Regulation Division, I think at some point in time, it may be appropriate for there to be a trade association that handles the educational requirements, disciplinary measures, things of that nature, much in the same way that the South Carolina Bar takes those up for attorneys. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen overnight, but I think that makes sense. And kind of looking at the trends, I think that's where we're going. You guys have been extremely blessed in South Carolina to have a team up here headed by Nick Cremitis that kind of looks at those macro trends and kind of goes ahead and tries to keep us on the cutting edge and tries to provide you with the latitude that you need to meet your customers' demands, because that's what they are, they're demands. I mean, a lot of times if they ask for something, they're not going to like for an answer by saying, well, South Carolina law won't allow me to do that, or, well, let me give you Tom Davis's number and call him and maybe you can get a hold of him. I mean, that's not what they're going to want to hear. They're going to want answers from y'all. And so what this bill does, S 1013, I think takes a giant step forward in terms of making sure that the law that governs your behavior conforms with what you're actually doing out there in the marketplace, from teams to any number of things, and provides you with a certain degree of an assurance that you're doing things the right way. It kind of gives you some safe harbors, and you realize that if you do certain things and behave in certain ways, you're going to be insulated from having anybody come back at you at the end of the day if things go south. So this is a bill that I have enjoyed working on. Unlike healthcare or education or roads or social services, it happens to be something that I know something about. I have been an attorney for the Beaufort County Board of Realtors. I've always said that a real estate closing isn't successful, and I haven't done my job as an attorney unless at the end of the day there's an exchange of documents, a deed recorded, and funds dispersed. I mean, I can do a fantastic job in a transaction, but if I don't get to that table and if a deal doesn't close, which I consider to be my primary function to get that deal closed, I haven't done my job. And you all know that there are a lot of attorneys out there that will be a little bit more persnickety and really don't have their eyes on getting the deal to close. But at the end of the day, that's what we're all about. We're about getting people together, having them reach an agreement, and then implementing it and getting it closed. I think S 1013 is going to help those guys get that job done. It's been a privilege working with your representatives in the State House. You guys are very, very ably represented. The South Carolina Realtors is always listened to. They always weigh in on the important issues. And I appreciate the opportunity to serve my people in Beaufort County, and particularly the realtors in Beaufort County. Thank you all very much.